Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives you a perspective, and there's definitely a level of entitlement that has permeated our modern day culture. And it's wonderful, honestly. It's amazing that we have air conditioning. It's amazing I can go to the grocery store and buy whatever I want, whether it's processed or not. It's amazing that if I'm too hot because I'm outside, I can come inside. And if I'm too cold because I'm inside, I can go outside. And that I've got a trampoline out there, and I've got so much abundance that I have a pet. He's laying around here somewhere in the office. I have a pet. Like, I'm buying extra food for something I don't actually really need. Like, we live in incredible times. Unfortunately, we just don't realize that coupled with our incredible abundance ought to be attached a level of humble gratitude and appreciation.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host, and today we've got an amazing guest for you guys. We have Ryan Michler from Order of Man, the Order of Man podcast. They have so many other groups, the Iron Council, that he is in charge of, a group of men basically helping people get on their feet to find other men around them that are supportive, that are helpful, whether it be with careers, with family life, with all the things that experience comes with life, you know, and that's what Ryan is all about. Been listening to his podcast for years now and following along in his journey and things that he has gone through. And I love that he is so open and shares his experience, good or bad, in things that he's had through life. So I'm excited to bring him on as a guest for you guys today. It's been years in the making at this point that we've been trying to get him on, and he agreed to spend some time with us and to go over a little bit more about who Ryan is and why you should be a part of Order of Man, the Iron Council, etc. Guys, I want to, before we get into this podcast with Ryan, I want to remind you that there's an amazing group with Phorm Outdoors over on the Phorm Outdoors Facebook group as well. And of course, right now we have the bow giveaway sweepstakes right now. Go check it out. The link will be down below to how you can get entered into the sweepstakes to win the ultimate bow sweepstakes. It's a Hoyt bow with a dialed sight and many other things that go along with it. Basically, you win this package and you are set between arrows and a target and broadheads and a sight and a bow, etc. So definitely want to go check it out. The link will be down below for that. Now, guys, again, if you like this podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, drop a comment, any questions that you have for me or for Ryan or any of the guests that you listen to the podcast and they're on, drop a comment down below. That helps support way more than you know. And if you're listening to the audio only version, definitely follow along, subscribe, whatever the button is according to the platform you're listening on, and leave a review. Those are free ways that you can help support the channel. Of course, if you're looking to support monetarily, you're in the market for some gear, some amazing supplementation or protein bars like my new favorite, the S'mores bar from Phorm, definitely go down below, save some money, and support the show that way as you're stocking up on gear or supplementation. Look forward to helping you out there as you help me out. Let's continue growing together. And now let's get into the podcast here that I'm super excited about, the conversation with Ryan Michler, Order of Man, and the Iron Council. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host, and today we've got a fantastic guest for you guys. We have Ryan Michler from Order of Man. If you guys don't know the Order of Man podcast, I'd ask if you've been listening to podcasts lately, because he's been around for a while, and I don't even know how many episodes he's been on, but he's got quite a few awesome, just outstanding guests that he brings on. And I fell in love with the podcast just a couple years ago when I started listening to it. And then there was a meetup that we had here in Salt Lake City with Kip and a group of guys, just outstanding men. So women out there listening, I recommend you send your men over to the Order of Man podcast, because they're just going to surround themselves with some great men that are just trying to improve themselves and not trying to sell you a bunch of crap. So, but with that being said, Ryan, for people that don't know who you are you, man?
Well, hey, first and foremost, it's good to see you. When I started Order of Man in 2015, somebody had made a comment. They're like, wait, what? I said Order of Man. And they said, Order a Man? I'm like, no, Order of Man. But then I also bought the domain name orderaman.com. So that one's also for the ladies. If they're interested, if you want to find one of these guys in our organization, just go to orderaman.com. That's a joke. I do own the domain, but it is not live. So please don't go look for that. Yeah, funny. I mean, like you said, brother, founder of Order of Man. I started that in 2015. I had done another podcast before, found out very, very quickly. I love podcasting. I love conversations like this. I realized pretty quickly that these long form type conversations are the real ones. They're the deep and meaningful ones that people are lacking in today's society. And so I think I got out ahead of the curve, not because I was smarter than anybody else, just because I happened to be at the right place at the right time and was intrigued by a couple of podcasts that I had listened to. So here we are almost 10 years later, man. 80 million podcast downloads, guys like Tim Tebow and Matthew McConaughey and Terry Crews and Ben Shapiro and David Goggins. I mean, I never in a million years thought I'd be playing at the level these guys are, but here we are. We're their peers, and these conversations are impacting men and their families in the order of millions. So I'm proud and also very honored that I could head up a movement like this to reclaim and restore masculinity.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's, I don't shy away from faith. And for people that don't know, there's a thing that came out in the 90s with the LDS Church about the family, a proclamation to the world. And I feel like that came out in a very important time frame that people were like, why are you saying about what a traditional family should be and what the roles are and why it's important to have parents, etc. And then, all of this stuff is going on right now where the family is being attacked. And it's similar to, I feel like you hit a niche at the time when people are like, why are you worried about masculinity going away? And now we're looking at today where they're literally recreating the Last Supper in a way in Paris, and it just blew my mind. And, just things like that. And guys, go look up what I'm talking about if you haven't heard or seen about it, and have a puke bucket ready as well, because it'll make you sick. But, with that, I don't think that necessarily, well, I would agree with you on the fact that long form conversations are just an amazing way to get to know people. And it's really why I fell in love with podcasting as well. I didn't jump on the train as soon as you, because I was still floundering a little bit.
I was too. Don't mistake. I was too, for sure.
Yeah. I was in my early 20s when you started Order of Man. So, but it's one of those things where you start something, you're consistent with it, and you've got that group that genuinely it's something that's needed. And something else, guys, that are out there listening, if you haven't heard of the Order of Man podcast, it really is. He brings people on. It's not just the picture perfect man. He mentioned a bunch of names that have been on. Even you've had Tim Grover on as well. And I love Tim Grover's story because he talks about how he was so heavily involved in building his career and taking care of his family that way that he wasn't always as present as possible with his family, but you can't have both. And so you bring people on that talk about different aspects of masculinity. Some people are going to be like the Michael Jordans, where they're just hardcore, always, aggressive and competitive. And then you're going to have the other ones that lean more towards being a dad and kind of that family life. And then other people that are more tactical. So there's a bunch of other ways to be masculine. You've kind of mesh all those people into your podcast, and it fits so many different men out there that need somewhere to go to be reminded that it's okay to be a man, that there are differences in men and women for a good thing. It's not that one's worse than the other, but we need to come together and work together in that way. And being a man is the best way to do that. So, with that, I appreciate the example that you set by not shying away from those things and bringing them into your podcast and talking about them in the way that you do. So with that, I guess,
hey, Jonathan, can I say one thing real quick too?
Yeah.
Just something that you mentioned. You had brought up the proclamation. So you're LDS, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm no longer LDS, but regardless, if you look into the Family Proclamation, I think it's a great document. It's a great testament. It's a beautifully crafted and written, thoughtful subject, I guess, on the role of men and women, regardless of where you stand from a religious or spiritual perspective. But if you look in there, you'll find this. Our motto is protect, provide, preside. If you look in the Family Proclamation, that's where that came from. I thought that's where you were going. All of those, protect, provide, preside, are in the Family Proclamation as a testament to the work that men should be doing in the lives of their family and community members and people they love and care about. So that's a direct reflection of where that came from. I didn't know if you knew that or not, but I wanted to bring that up.
I think I remember you mentioning it in one of the previous podcasts, but there's been so many that I've listened to at this point, I get them mixed up. Especially between you and Andy Frisella, there's a lot of good tips and how to be a better man and more productive. And
I know, man, I see you representing that first Phorm gear. So I actually talked to Andy this morning. We had a brief discussion via Instagram, but man, he's one of the best, man. He is so good.
Yeah, he really is. I had a funny experience with him. I don't know if I've shared it on the podcast, but last time I went out to headquarters to help out with the first Phorm Outdoors games, he's in the locker room in his special seat, sitting there hanging out with DJ, and he gets up to give us the handshake, bro hug, and he backs up from the bro hug, and he's like, "What are you wearing?" And I was like, "I'm just beard oil," and he was like, "Man, I want to hug you again. That smells good." I was like, so for people that don't know much about Andy, like he's really is a real guy. He may come off gruff and aggressive on the podcast, but it's because he's passionate about what he does and the things. Just like with you, how passionate you are about the message that you're putting out there. You guys really are leaders in your own spaces, respectively, and that's the reason why you're able to have the guests on that you have. That do show, again, just those different aspects of protect, provide, and preside, because you can't look at one man and say that is the perfect example, because every single man is here, just like every person is here on this earth for different reasons, and to portray those different things in a different way. You're going to do it a different way than I do, but we may end up at the same result kind of deal. So with that,
yeah. That's the beautiful thing, right? Is that we can all have different perspectives and different ideas and different ways of approaching things. And what somebody might listen to this and think, that guy's an idiot. And another guy might think, that guy had so much to share that really helped me. There's so much information out there. Just find what works for you.
Exactly. So with that being said, I guess walk us through a little bit as to why did you feel it was important to hit so much on masculinity at the time when you started the podcast in Order of Man back in 2015? Things weren't as crazy back then as they are now. Did you have some inklings of something coming that maybe you wanted to address before it got as big as it is now, or like what brought you to wanting to focus so much on masculinity and how to be better men and share examples of that by bringing people on the podcast?
Yeah, I didn't know. I was dumb. I still am dumb. So I didn't know that there was going to be some sort of wave against masculinity or towards reclaiming, restore masculinity. I didn't know that. It was very selfishly driven. Honestly, it was me just realizing that I wanted to be a better man, that I wanted to improve as a business owner, a leader in my community, or an aspiring leader at the point. I wanted to be a better father, husband, all those things, and I'd really lacked for a permanent father figure in my life when I was growing up. The more I talked about these real actual issues, as opposed to the things that we hear all the time from guys about, like, oh, who's going to win the World Series or the Super Bowl, or like, I don't care about any of that. I really don't. And I'm not bashing that. Like, if that's your thing and you're really excited about your local team, by all means, like, have some fun with the guys. But I have bigger issues, so I'll worry about some of that. But the rest of my life is spent trying to improve and grow and develop and be better. And that's what I wanted. So I had this other podcast that I was doing with my financial planning practice called Wealth Anatomy. And so I was doing that. And then I realized, man, I love podcasting. What conversations do I really want to have, though? Is it about stock market investing? Not really. So I decided I'm going to pivot away from my podcast. That was called Wealth Anatomy. I think there's probably some podcast covers still floating around. You can, if you really cared, you could go look and see what I looked like then. Totally different than now. And I started Order of Man. And I told a guy, one of my early friends, mentors, coaches, early on, I'm like, I'm going to do this for 2 years. I'm not going to make a decision about quitting, leaving, staying, growing, anything. I'm just going to do it for 2 years and just let it ride and see what happens. And we took off immediately. And that's not a testament to me. That's a testament of being in the right place at the right time when enough guys were worried about the same conversations about how do I show up for my wife? How do I engage my kids? How do I lead my employees? How do I engage in the community in a very respectful, encouraging, powerful way? And we took off, man, almost instantaneously. And it was really exciting. And to see how far it's come since then has been pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, I posted something today just about you need to go out and live and enjoy life and do things that you love, because that's going to bring you joy. Now, obviously don't go out and, become some kind of hippie that doesn't pay the bills and doesn't take care of his family. That's not what I'm meaning. But when you go out and you find things that you enjoy doing, it's easier to do them. Doesn't mean that it's not work sometimes, because the podcast, your website, your merch, everything else that you have going on isn't easy per se. There's days I'm sure you wake up and you're like, oh man, like, I love doing what I'm doing, but today I just really don't feel like it, but you do it anyway. And so it doesn't mean that there's not work involved in passions and things that we love doing, but it makes you happy and it makes you feel fulfilled when you do those things versus going in and punching a clock and, clocking out at the end of the day and not feeling like doing it, but you do it anyway. You don't feel fulfilled at the end of the day. There's kind of two different paths there with pushing through the days that you don't feel like doing things. And so, the fact that you were saying you just felt like, I want to have these conversations. I want to do it for 2 years. I want to do this kind of almost selfishly at the beginning, but since then it's turned into something else. And it's just blown up because you are passionate about it. It fills your bucket more than financial planning might have, filled your pockets a lot better. It's just something that that a lot of people don't recognize, that it's taken 10 years to get to this point. And when you pictured doing it for 2. So what shifted after those 2 years that made you keep doing it?
Well, I want to be very upfront about something. I didn't love it when I started. It wasn't like, this is my passion. This is what God called me to do. This is like, I'm so motivated and driven by this. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else in my life. I don't think it works like that.
The clouds opened up and the angels sang and told you this.
I wish. It would have been a whole lot easier if they did, but they didn't. And for me, it was just something that was interesting. It really wasn't more than that. That's where a lot of men go wrong. They think that once they found their thing, that the angels come, like you said, and part the clouds and beat them over the head with their trumpets as they sing hallelujah. Look, if that's what happened to you, by all means, cool. Like, that would be great. But for me, it didn't work like that. It was just, as I said, something that I was interested in. Thought, I'm going to start a podcast from my financial planning practice. Okay. Realize I like podcasting. Don't want to talk about that. Maybe I can start a podcast about something else. All right. So I start a podcast about manliness and interviewing guys who I was inspired by and motivated by. And over time, significantly less than 2 years, I realized, oh, we're on to something. And that's where I really began the passion and the love. It wasn't when I started. It was after I stepped into it. And that's the mistake a lot of guys make. They think, oh, well, like, if it's my thing, I'm going to love it immediately. No, bro, you just need to go find something you're interested in. That's it. And I believe as a God-fearing man that if you're interested in something, then you should explore it. You don't have to commit yourself to it. You don't have to invest a bunch of money into it. You don't need to forsake everything else you're doing. You just need to explore it. So for me, it was podcasting. For another guy who's listening to this podcast, both you and I hunt. You might be interested in hunting. You'd be like, hey, I've never been on a hunt. I'd like to go do that sometime. So you go purchase a $2,000 pig hunt in Texas somewhere and you go do it and you realize that's awesome or that sucks. And then you find something else or you dive deeper into it. But the message I really want to portray to the men is that it's not going to come hit you like a bolt of lightning. It's just going to be a very small, and I know you know this through your faith, very, very soft, very quiet, very faint little whisper of like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that. And then you take one step and then you realize, oh, I'm a little bit more intrigued now. And you take another step and then a bigger step and then a leap. And then you start running. And that's how it has been with Order of Man. Is when you asked me the question, how did it go for the first 2 years? It was like that. It was a step and then a bigger step and then a stride and then a jog and then a run. And now it's like a sprint, but it's like a marathon, but it's sprint speed. Like I'm trying to run towards this as fast as I can.
Yeah. No, and I love that. And the thing is too, you know, people that are familiar with Christianity know about the Holy Ghost and the still small voice. And I've served a mission, and I lived in North Carolina, came out here. I've been in different cultures and environments, and I've noticed people react differently to that prompting. And it could be something as simple as you're interested in it. You had no idea why that was interesting to you when you started the podcast, but then you realized this is something that is catching on. And I honestly do feel like you're doing something that not many men want to put the time into, or whatever it is, to create the podcast that you've created in the I guess the library of episodes of people that people can go and listen to David Goggins talk to you in a way that he didn't talk to Joe Rogan or whoever else he's been on a podcast with. And you have a certain way of asking questions that pull things out of these men that, even though they may have been on other podcasts, they didn't have these specific questions asked to them. And also you look up to them in a different way, whether it be as a peer or as someone that you aspire to be like in a certain way than someone else who's had them on the podcast. So for all those reasons, that it's amazing. You're doing awesome work. But, as far as people finding their passions or things that they're even just interested in, people react differently to that prompting. Some people cry. Some people have, I recently had an experience where I was looking to move a certain way with certain partnerships. I had certain offers and I, prayed about it, went to sleep, and I don't ever remember my dreams. I sleep like a rock. And so I had a very vivid dream, and it was very interesting because I remember the person, the handshake, the feeling that I had, and I went that direction, and that relationship went to crap. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. But weeks afterwards, because I said no to these other things and yes to this one that ended up going to crap, other doors were opened that have now created better opportunities. So all of that to be said, you may not have a clear path in front of you, but if you have that interest and you have the work ethic, which is another thing that you had when you got into this, the drive to do it, things will happen. Doors will be opened, and take that interest, and maybe that particular thing that you're interested in doesn't come to fruition, but it opened other doors that will in turn create another path for you to go down and to make a difference. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I thought you just hopped into it thinking this is the best thing to do. This is something I wanted to do. So yeah.
No, I mean, I had a successful financial planning practice. I was making multiple six figures. Why would I step away from that? Like I was doing it, man. And it took me a long time. It took me 9 years to grow my business to that point. So why would I step away from that? This was just an activity. It was just a hobby, something I was doing on the side.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So have you always been into hunting?
No, I started hunting like 8 or 9 years ago. I had called, or I had made a message in a post in our Facebook group. And I said, hey, look, guys, I'm trying to get into SHOT Show down in Las Vegas. If anybody can get me into SHOT, like, let me know. We can figure it out. And a guy reached out. His name's Colin. You know Colin.
Yeah.
Colin and I talked. He reached out to me. He's like, hey, I can get you in a SHOT Show. I'm like, sweet. So he got me into SHOT Show, and I had to show up, and he like had a letter from a company. I won't say the company, but he had a letter from a company that I was an employee of that company, and that's how I got into SHOT Show. So I spent some time with Colin, and we were doing our thing, and then he's like, "Hey man, do you want to meet Ted Nugent? Do you want to have him on your podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, cool, obviously." And everybody blows smoke, right? Like nobody follows through. Everybody talks a big game. I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great, cool, whatever." I didn't think anything of it. The very next week, I'm podcasting with Ted Nugent, and Colin set that up for me. And then he messages me. He's like, "Hey man, do you want to go on your first hunt?" I'm like, "Yeah, like I'd love to go hunt, but like I don't have a gun, or like I don't know what we're doing." He's like, "I know, you got to go buy one." I'm like, "Okay, what do I buy?" So he helped me out with that. So I ended up buying. This was probably in 2016 or 17. I ended up buying a little Ruger American 308. Still have it. I've shot a lot of animals with that at this point. And I bought a bow. The Hoyt, I think it was called the Pro Defiant, Carbon Defiant, Pro Defiant. I can't remember exactly. And we went down to Texas, which was where he had a friend that needed to cull some of his bucks that weren't with great genetics. So he's like, "Come down, we'll do it for free." I'm like, "Cool, let's go do it." So the first day I was out there, I ended up shooting my very first buck. I affectionately refer to him as Crab Claw. He's out in the living room. I wish I could show you, but he's really weird, old, mature, 7-8 years old. He's got like these single like tines that come up, and then he's just got like 2 forks right on the end, and just some like little small eye guards. Just, he's a very weird, interesting buck. But shot him with my rifle, and then I think the next day maybe Colin had shot in a deer, and then I think the third day I ended up shooting a deer with my bow. And that's a whole other story that would take a long time to talk about that story. But I fell in love with it, man. And Colin got me into it. He took my son on his first hunt, a pig hunt, me and him and Colin in Texas. I've been to Hawaii. I hunt every year in Minnesota. We did it. My oldest son and I did a moose hunt in Maine. We got this amazing 48-inch Shiras moose. We're going to Africa in a week. Like, hunting is not just something I enjoy. It's part of life at this point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's funny that it's just so matter of fact. It's just, well, yeah, you got to buy a gun. Like,
I was like,
you should have one.
Okay. Yeah. And it wasn't that I was not familiar with guns. I spent time in the military. Right. I joined the military when I was 17 years old. I've been around rifles. I've been around pistols. It wasn't like I was unfamiliar with, but I had no reason to own a gun. And until he introduced me, and now I've got my safe over here. I probably need a little bigger safe like most of us do. And I've got my EDC right here and some other pistols, and like guns are all over the place now at my place.
Yep, exactly. No, that's kind of how it goes. There's something that gets you introduced to it, and then you realize, oh, I should probably have more. And then you get a bigger safe, and you're like, I need to fill that space.
Yeah. Well, and I've got like, I've literally got 4 bows in my house. I shoot one of them. I'm like, why do I have 4 bows? Because why not? Like, you need 4. Yeah. You need a right-handed, you need a left-handed, you need a Hoyt, you need a PSE, like you need everything. So just keep buying them. Anyways, I caught the bug.
There you go. That's awesome. So do you have any, I mean, you mentioned something ahead of time before we hopped on the podcast here. What hunts do you have coming up this year?
Yeah, so I've got, like I said, Africa. That's a rifle hunt primarily. I'm going to bring my bow out there, and I might get some opportunities with the bow. But my oldest son and I, he's 16. We've got the Africa hunt. We've got wildebeest. I've got a wildebeest tag. He's got a zebra tag. Then we both have springbuck, gemsbuck, I think is how you say it. Warthogs and impalas. So we'll be out there for about 8 days hunting in Africa. So excited about that.
That's awesome.
I've got a Minnesota whitetail hunt.
I would say with Africa, remind me, with South Africa, do they allow you to bring the meat back, or is that donated to the local tribes?
No. So I work with an organization that I helped co-found called M42 Adventures. Okay. And our goal is to introduce people to the outdoors through outdoor experiences, whether it's hunting. We've got a Costa Rica trip planned in spring of 2025, ATV tours, horseback riding tours, anything outdoors we do with M42. So we're doing that. It's an M42 event in Africa. Now, you can't bring the meat back. You can have it taxidermied out there if you want. But the cool thing about what we're doing, and this isn't something a lot of hunters do when they go out there, they go hunt, which is cool. It's great. No problem. But one thing that we're doing different is we're actually going to a local orphanage and we're going to donate not only the meat, but we've got about $3,000 to $4,000 worth of sponsors that are going to sponsor things that they need, from school supplies to blankets to soccer balls and footballs and different things they like to play with, toys, things like that. So we're going to do the hunt. We're going to do the humanitarian effort. And then we're also doing a helicopter tour of South Africa. And then the last thing that we're doing is a photo safari. So we're actually going to be riding around all of the ranges and properties and checking out the predators, the lions, and things like that, but giraffes and wildebeest and zebra and crocodiles and you name it. I'm so excited for it.
That's awesome. Is this your first time in Africa?
Yeah. And my son, my 16-year-old, he's my oldest. I have 4, but he's my oldest. He's been wanting to go to Africa since the time that he could talk, he's told us. So we had these books when he was little. They're animal books, and we would help him learn how to read through animals. You know, he'd be like, oh, it's a crocodile, it's a hippopotamus. So he'd read all the things, and he's always wanted to go to Africa. So here we are 13, 14 years later, since the time he told us he wanted to go, and we're going. So this is amazing.
That's awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I haven't been, eventually it's on the list, but my wife actually asked me beginning of this year, she's like, why haven't you gone to hunt Africa yet? I'm like, because I haven't killed what I want to kill here in the US yet. So
I get it.
Get there
I totally
eventually.
get it.
Yeah.
Like, the US is amazing. There's so many different states, obviously 50 states, and there's so many different animals that you can hunt, from moose to predators like mountain lions to mule deer and whitetail and coos deer. And I mean, there's bear. There's so much to hunt here. But if you want to come to Africa, I can let you know about our trips next year. We've got one planned next year already.
Sweet. No, that's awesome. That is exciting. And there's definitely a lot of, a lot of people think you go over there just for trophy hunting and stuff like that. And the people that I know that have gone over there, it's more about almost I wouldn't call it a mission trip, but a service trip mixed with obviously your passion for hunting and getting to hunt some of these animals that you'll only get to hunt once in your lifetime. And it sounds like you guys are doing something very similar where you're spending time out there, which that's going to be super beneficial for your 16-year-old to be able to see that.
Totally.
And go over there and my daughter went with my wife. They went with a women's group down to hike Machu Picchu. So they had like a women's adventure group that they went down there, and my daughter, so when she saw the poverty that those kids were living in Peru, and just that their teeth were, not even close to white, and not all of their teeth were in their head, like just all the things that were going on with the poverty down there, it made her kind of realize, like, not that she acted like a spoiled brat, but it made her realize, like, wow, I can literally put whatever I want in the grocery cart and you guys will buy it for me. And I used to complain about brushing my teeth, and these people here don't even have running water and air conditioning and barely get enough food to stay alive, let alone feel like their needs are met, So it's definitely an eye-opening experience, and it's something that I personally recommend to people. Obviously, being LDS, serving a mission, but even if you don't do that, joining the military or doing something that sends you to another country to live for a certain amount of time and see what those people go through and then come back. I feel like that would solve a lot of the issues that we have here in the US of just spoiled rottenness, where they just feel like they're owed all these things, when they grow up, and they're just provided these things because it's so easy, and claiming that certain things are hard. It's like, okay, well, Go live in a different country and then you come back here and say that that's hard. You know, like, oh
Yeah.
no, your air conditioner didn't work for a day. Boo-hoo. You know, like
Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives you a perspective, and there's definitely a level of entitlement that has permeated our modern day culture. And it's wonderful. Honestly, it's amazing that we have air conditioning. It's amazing I can go to the grocery store and buy whatever I want, whether it's processed or not. It's amazing that if I'm too hot because I'm outside, I can come inside, and if I'm too cold because I'm inside, I can go outside. And that I've got a trampoline out there, and I've got so much abundance that I have a pet. He's laying around here somewhere in the office. I have a pet. Like, I'm buying extra food for something I don't actually really need. Like, we live in incredible times. Unfortunately, we just don't realize that, coupled with our incredible abundance, ought to be attached a level of humble gratitude and appreciation and ultimately responsibility. And I think that's what so many of our young people are lacking, is that, and part of this is our fault. You know, we give our kids everything they could possibly dream of. Like, your daughter puts food in the grocery cart, and it's like, okay, without batting an eye about it. And that's a great position to be in, but also at what cost? You know, our kids, and this is not an indictment against you as much as it is about me and anybody else might be listening, but our kids have so much prosperity. And I remember when I was little, this isn't significant really in the grand scheme of human evolution, but when I was little, I always wanted designer shoes, you know, like get the Nikes, get the Reeboks, whatever I wanted. But my mom raised me and my sister primarily on her own, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. So we always went to Payless Shoe Source. That was where we got shoes, and we got shoes maybe once, maybe twice a year. And those were our shoes for the year. And we weren't broke by any means, but we didn't have a bunch of discretionary money to just throw around and everything. And now I'm in the position where we do. And it's lovely. It's great, you know, that I can get my kids all these things. But again, am I hamstringing my kids? Probably in some way. So I think we need to temper that level of abundance with this deep sense of responsibility, that in order to enjoy the creature comforts that we do, we need to take responsibility. And the reason that we enjoy the creature comforts that we do is because somebody else decided to take responsibility. It wasn't me. I didn't create capitalism. I didn't fight for this free country. I mean, granted, I was in the military. I spent 8 years in the National Guard, but I didn't die for this country. I didn't risk everything for this country. Like, I did a tour in 2005 and 2006 in Iraq, and then I came home, and like life carried on as it normally does. And that was the extent of my sacrifice for generations. But there's men and women who took on so much more responsibility so we could bitch and moan and cry about your AC, like you said, going out for a day. Poor you. Your AC went out. Or, Netflix isn't working. You can't pull up your latest show to binge watch Netflix when you ought to be mowing your elderly woman's neighbor's yard, or, you know, something more significant than that.
Brief interruption, but you guys definitely want to know that if you're still in the market for some last minute gear items, there are ways that you can save some money, get your gear fast, and they're down below with BlackOvis. You can get custom arrows. You can get boots from Crispy Boots, which are my favorite, my go-to. You can get clothing items. You can get jackets. BlackOvis has an amazing lineup that isn't going to break the bank, and you'll be able to get a good layering system through the BlackOvis system. Or if you're looking for other items such as Cryptech, etc., those are down below. Definitely check it out. Everything from optics all the way to freeze-dried meals and everything in between, the gear that you need. Go check out BlackOvis. Save some money with code RedBeard10. Support the channel and get your gear at the best price possible from my favorite place to go shop for gear, over at BlackOvis. Now let's get back to the podcast with Ryan Michler and Order of Man. Exactly. No, I'm there with you. It's like, you know, you want to bless your kids and give them everything because you've worked for it, but at the same time, it's like, how do you teach the lessons that maybe you learned? You know, in that same vein, you know, you want to teach them, but there's times where I'm like, man, you know, my youngest, my my youngest boy, he's 9, and sometimes I'm like, all right, Mr. No delayed gratification, you know, because he just wants it now. And I'm like, oh,
Of course.
man, I need to be, but whose fault is that, right? It's not his fault that he's
Not
learned
his.
that. Yeah, exactly. And there's ways that I need to teach that better. And then it makes you look inward and be like, man, that's me coming out. Like that's me without a filter coming out in him right now. I need to help him out. How would I help my younger self? But no, that's awesome. So getting back on to, so you mentioned going to Africa, and then you said you go whitetail hunting in Minnesota every year. Is that a family plot that you have, or you got some friends up there that it's the annual thing?
Yeah. I've gone for probably 8 years now or so, give or take. And when I started the movement, I had a good friend of mine, his name is Sam Rodriguez. He reached out, he came to a couple of our events, and we kind of hit it off and became friends. And he invited me to go out to a friend's place in Minnesota. They have this beautiful property, thousands of acres, and they just manage it really, really well. So it's not public land, but it's also not high fence or anything. They just manage their land really, really well. And I went out there one year, fell in love with it. This was probably the first year I went hunting. And then I've gone out every year since. And our group has grown. You know, we got 8, 9 guys that come out. Sometimes one guy can't make it, and so somebody else fills in. But I shot my biggest deer out there. I shot a white-tailed deer. He was 297 pounds on the hoof. Like, he was
That's a
beast of a deer. Yeah, he's a big body deer. Shot a pretty decent deer last year. Unfortunately, he was nice, man. He came in. I heard him grunting from maybe 100 yards away, and I heard him. I'm sitting in a stand. I'm like, oh, he's coming in. He came in. I took a shot, and he ran off. And I spent hours and hours looking for him and never could find him. And then Minnesota gets these bad winters, so they get tons of snow and everything gets covered. My buddy, his name's Matt Schmigdahl, he calls me up and he's like, hey man, I found your deer. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the deer you shot last year, I found it. And I was like, you found it dead? He's like, yeah, you killed it. I'm like, well, how do you know I killed it? He's like, because I found its arrow in it laying there. Found your arrow in it. And he sent me a picture, and sure enough, that deer was there, halfway decayed, my arrow sticking right in him. It was just high. My shot was high. So I hit him high lungs. So he just ran forever. And so he found him. No blood trail. Ran forever. They're big fat deer. They're well fed. And so they've got fat. They blow through the holes when they get shot. And it's hard to track them at times. But we have a great time out. My son actually went out there last year with me, my oldest. He's a better hunter than I am. Our friends invited us to come do a muzzleloader hunt. And I'd never shot muzzleloader. My son never shot muzzleloader. And we went out there on a late season muzzleloader hunt. And it was cold, man, just cold as balls. Like, it was so cold. And the last day of the hunt, my son had never shot a muzzleloader. A nice little doe came out and he blasted her. She ran 30 yards and died. And he was able to harvest his first deer off a muzzleloader. He's shot axis deer in Hawaii and whitetail in Pennsylvania with rifles. He's doing it all, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. That's a special experience. And I think a part of me too wants to hold off on some of these adventure hunts until my kids show interest and are old enough to go with me as well. Cause I don't know if I'd love to say I'd go to Hawaii every year and I'd go to Africa every year, but I don't know if that's really going to happen, and so I do kind of want to get to that spot where, and I'm young enough, I'm 32. So I'm like, I got plenty of time. My kids will be old enough to go with me in 3 years. So we're good.
You'll go to Hawaii every year, man. We've got some great places out there in Hawaii. You'll go every year to Hawaii. Africa's a little harder just because of the time constraint, the cost and everything else, but Hawaii's easy, man. That's a quick little hop. You go on for a week and come back, and we have a good time out there.
Sweet. Now, that's awesome. So it sounds like you've got a pretty busy season, even though, it's a little different than maybe some other people that hunt just here in the U.S. But again, I'm jealous of that Africa hunt. That sounds like a lot of fun. And not just the hunting part, but, getting to go and see all the animals, and then of course, meet and mingle with the people over there and give again of your abundance, and obviously the partners that are able to sponsor some of that travel and provide for, for the tribe as well. That's awesome.
A lot of
Again,
guys will just hunt Utah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I really don't want to hike the same mountains all the time. I don't want to chase around the same elk all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. Some guys love it. They catch the elk bug or whatever, white or a mule deer bug or whatever. That's cool. But like for me, I'm like, man, there's so much other stuff available. I want to experience it all, from stabbing pigs in Texas to shooting moose in Maine to archer, you taking your bow out and doing archery in Africa to bow hunt and for axis deer in Hawaii. Like I want to do it all, man.
Oh yeah.
I got a caribou hunt in 2025 in Canada. Like I want to do everything.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to get up there and do some bear too, but looking forward to probably in the spring getting up to Oregon and doing some black bear hunting up there.
Awesome.
I've never been to Oregon, so that's somewhere I'd love to go and visit and see up there as well. So, but with that being said, so your oldest is 16. How many kids do you have again?
4 kids.
4 kids. Okay, and they're not all boys, correct?
Yeah, so I've got a 16-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy, 10-year-old girl, and 8-year-old boy.
Okay, gotcha. And so, with your daughter, have you noticed, does she have you wrapped around her finger?
Not, she used to, not now because she's being a moody pre-pubescent teenager. But yeah, I mean, she does. She knows she does. It's different, right? It's different when you have boys and girls, and everybody who's had a boy and a girl knows that there is a difference. And so I'm definitely experiencing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, my youngest daughter, whenever I get onto my 9-year-old, she hops right to it, and gets done whatever. It's so funny.
Yeah, yeah. My daughter's 10, so she's right there about the same age.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So with the things that you enjoy, so I know you like jujitsu. Are you still rolling at a gym? I know you used to go to Unified when you were here in Utah, but
no, I never went to Unified. I would train periodically at Unified just because my buddy Kip Sorensen is up there at Unified.
Right.
But I would just do drop-ins. I've only been there 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Gotcha. But yeah, I trained at a gym with Origin. I don't know if you're familiar with Origin, but I trained with Origin out of Maine when I lived there. And then I trained with Fusion Martial Arts here in Southern Utah. I wish I could say I'm more active than I am. It's just been so busy between my schedule of work and the kids. And, my other goals with strength training. I've been doing a lot of strength training lately too. So that's kind of taken a sidestep to everything else I have going on. But I do train maybe once or twice a month. It's not much, but I do train a little, very little.
Yeah. So I guess with that, obviously you've gone through phases of your physical training. You played sports in your younger years, and then you've transitioned through jiu-jitsu and a bunch of other things. What would you say for the dads out there that are looking to maybe not, they don't feel like they need to step on stage or even compete in anything, but they've got the busy lifestyle like you're running, where they've got jobs, maybe multiple jobs, or they're trying to start a business and have a job. They have kids, they've got a spouse, or maybe they're a single dad that's got kids and job and everything else. What are a couple, maybe 1 or 2 things that you'd say are what push you to train? And right now, strength training being your highlight, but to train in whatever way to be prepared for life.
I can't really tell you other than I just have a desire to be better. I mean, that's really what it is for me. I just want to be better. And I know strength training is a huge part of that. I also know it's something I can sustain. Too many times guys will get into activities that are unsustainable. Are you into strength training, powerlifting? Like what specifically do you do, Jonathan?
So I recently quit the gym because I've got so much GoRuck equipment at home.
Okay. Yeah.
Bands and stuff that I'm doing stuff more at home. So I've transitioned more into that functional fitness rucking style. But
what are you? Your background is powerlifting. What's your background?
No, just mainly strength training and
strength
sports
training? Okay.
In high school. Yeah. Baseball, football, that kind of
You're
lifting.
Just built like a power lifter. Cause my son did like competitive power. My oldest son did competitive powerlifting, and you're built like a power lifter. I don't care what it is. Like, I really don't. It, you know, if it's powerlifting, like you said, strength training, now you're like, oh man, I got rucking stuff. If it's jujitsu, I'm into strength training mostly, primarily right now. My girlfriend's really into hiking. She loves to hike. She runs circles around me. I'm like, I'm not built for hiking. Like, like muscles and hiking don't go together, or fat, I should say. That's more likely. Fat and hiking don't go together. That's more accurate. But she's like 3% body fat and just like loves to hike like a freaking mountain goat, and she runs circles around me. It really doesn't matter what it is the point I'm making. What matters is, are you going to do it? That's it. If you tell yourself, I really want to strength train, but you hate strength training, don't do strength training. I don't like running, so I don't run. Should I build in some cardio to my planning? Sure. But I'm just not going to run. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It's miserable. It's stupid to me. It's not stupid objectively. Subjectively, it's stupid to me. And so I don't do it. And that's the problem people have with their personal fitness journeys, is they look around at what you're doing or what I'm doing or what that other person's doing, and they think, oh, that guy's doing it, I admire him, so I got to do it that way. It doesn't matter. Just do something. My oldest son and my second son are into lacrosse. I never played lacrosse. I played football. And so we've got fall coming up here relatively soon. And so it's football season. They're like, nope, it's fall lacrosse season. I'm like, what the hell is that? There's no fall lacrosse. It's football season. They're like, nope, it's fall lacrosse. I'm like, fine. I don't care. Do whatever you're going to do, but just be engaged in it. So that's what it is for me. If it engages me and keeps me going, and strength training keeps me going. So when you say, what is it that gets you up and gets you going? Number one, it's the desire to be better than I was yesterday. And I'm actually doing something I enjoy. I got up this morning. You can hear a little rasp in my voice. I'm fighting off a little bit of like some congestion or a little cold, something. I got something going on. And I woke up at 6 o'clock. That's what's up. No, I woke up at 5:30 this morning. My alarm goes off at 6. I woke up at 5:30. I'm like, oh, screw that. Set the alarm for 30 more minutes. Woke up at 6. I'm like, screw that. Set it for another 30 minutes. Woke up at 6:25. I'm like, all right, dude, get your ass out of bed. And I could have stayed in bed, and I was tempted to, but I got up at 6:25. I'm like, all right, man, you got an hour in the gym. Go get it done. And so I went to the gym and I worked some back and I worked some arms, and I came out of there tired and a little out of breath, but feeling way better than I did before. Mm-hmm. So I just know it's good for me. I see there's people in the gym I see every day. They're fit and they're strong. And I've talked to some of them and I'm like, man, how are you so disciplined? And they're like, I'm not disciplined. I just like it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, that's a better answer. You know, everybody says like, be disciplined. I'm like, if you like it, you don't have to be disciplined because you actually like it. And for me, it's trying to find joy in the things that I'm doing. And if I find no joy in it, I just do something else. It's fine.
Yeah. So you don't have to be the David Goggins that has beat his meniscus up to where it's shoe leather.
No, like David Goggins is a great example because look, I've interviewed almost 500 highly, highly successful people in their own right. And a lot of these guys are so obsessed with their thing. David Goggins is obsessive. Cam Hanes is obsessive. I don't want to be either of those guys. I can respect both of them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be those guys. I want to be a more well-rounded human being. And so my regiment looks a little different than theirs, but it works for me. And so I can be motivated. I can be disciplined from Goggins and I can be motivated from Cam and also live my own life, which I think just comes with a level of maturity.
Yep. No, I definitely agree with that. And, you know, it's funny is, you know, when you listen to them and the messages that those kind of guys put out there about fitness and such, they don't necessarily, at least the way I understand it is, they don't really put people down that don't do what they do unless they're talking crap or trying to compete against them. Other than that, they're just like, man, just get out and do something. You know, get out of bed, right? Like what you were saying.
Those guys are trying to motivate people in their own way, and it resonates with some and it doesn't resonate with others. Cam doesn't put people down. I mean, he's going to stand his ground and defend himself, but he's not out there bashing on people. He's like, here's what I do. If it helps you, awesome. If it doesn't, awesome. If you come at me, I'm going to defend myself and my way of life. If you don't, then we're good. Like, that's kind of Cam's message.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So I do want to hit on something here. We've kind of spoken about, and this is where I've seen your kind of transition just from a distance from the podcast. Earlier I wasn't listening to it back in 2015, but probably around the 2020, 2021 timeframe is when I started listening to it. And for people that don't know you've gone through a situation in the last couple years. You've gone through a divorce where you've got kids involved. You are across the country from your ex at this point, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. I personally appreciate that you don't shy away from that or try and point the blame or do things that maybe other men have. I've seen it happen. People always, that person that's been through a divorce, or maybe multiple of your friends, and you see how it ruins certain people's lives. When you came out and talked about it, I remember the podcast. I don't remember all the details because it's been a little while now, but I appreciate the fact that you pointed out that there were things that you contributed to it, and you didn't just point all the blame at your ex. That is something that I appreciate, being a child and being the oldest of 5 and seeing my parents divorce, and how that wasn't it wasn't as nice as when
typically isn't.
And yeah, it's typically not. And so you put it in a way that I feel like a lot of men, hopefully no one ever has to go through that. And I think you even mentioned that in the podcast. Like, it's something that you don't wish on anyone, right? But if it does happen, what are some things that maybe you've learned or even applied? And then you mentioned you've got something coming up as well to help men that are going through a similar situation. So I guess let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I want to set the record straight, though, and I'm not really sure where this comes from, but some people think that I live away from my ex-wife and children. They live 2 miles down the road.
Oh, I thought they were still in Maine, so that was my.
So a lot of people think that, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. But so just to paint a picture here, and maybe this will be helpful. My ex-wife and I moved from Southern Utah to Maine to live out there. And we lived there for about 4 years and had a really good experience all in all. Unfortunately, we ended up going through divorce, and I'll get into that in a little bit here. But when we went through that divorce, we both consciously made the decision to move back to Southern Utah, not together. I mean, we came together, but once we got here, it was over. So she lives 2 miles north of me. I live here. And I have the kids 50% of the time, and she has the kids 50% of the time. And all things considered, we're pretty cordial with each other. We work well together as co-parents. She has the kids' best interest at heart, and so do I. Yeah. And so it works out pretty well. I don't really know. A lot of people have said that. I don't really know where that idea comes from, but no, they're close. And it has to be that way because my kids are the most important thing. My business isn't, my finances aren't. My physical fitness isn't. Like, it's my kids. And so I'm going to be close to them.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate you clarifying that, because I was actually going to ask, how do you do that? I don't know where, and maybe it's just because it's not a topic that you necessarily talk about per se.
It might be,
or even brought up. Yeah, so that might be it. Just thinking, you were in Maine, was the last that I knew about it, and then you got divorced, and now you're in Southern Utah, but you don't ever obviously talk about your ex being here. So that makes sense.
Yeah, everybody moved back. Yeah, and I made the decision early on when we went through our divorce that I wasn't going to talk ill of her. I actually don't have a lot of bad things to say anyways. There's days where I'm pissed off or bugged or whatever. We're all human and we all have our issues. And I feel like in some ways, maybe it wasn't handled as well as I think it could have been. But at the end of the day, like, what's the point of getting all into that? Like, the only thing that I can control is myself. And so for me, I started drinking a little bit. I'd have a drink once a week or on the weekends. And then that turned into, a drink a night. And that turned into 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 drinks a night. And then, before I knew it, I was day drinking. And then it got so bad that I would go get a pint or a half pint of whiskey in the morning. And then I would sit in the driveway and my family would be inside. I'd be sitting in the driveway drinking a half pint of whiskey before I'd go in and like say good morning to them or start my day. And it got horrible. And I became irritable. I wasn't treating them well. Never any physical abuse, never any infidelity, but for a couple of years, just not showing up. Yeah. And it was really hard, you know, to talk about that, because I'd been espousing these virtues of like showing up for your family and being a good protector, provider, presider. And I wasn't being those things. I was never hypocritical. Some people have accused me of being hypocritical. I think hypocritical is believing one thing for somebody or something, but doing something completely different. It's never that I didn't believe that the message I was sharing wasn't an important one. It's that I found it really, really difficult in the wake of my drinking to adhere to what I knew was right. And don't we all do that? Like, don't we all fall short? And I'm not trying to excuse it or make it an easier, softer blow for me. I'm just saying it's a good testament to how well or how easily you can stray when you know what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. And so she came to me and said something. I can't remember what she said. And I was probably drunk already at the time. We were about to go to church, and I was like, wait a second. Are you saying you want a divorce? And she's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I was shocked. I felt blindsided. Looking back, I probably could have seen some of those warning signs, but I spent about 6 months doing everything I could. The next morning, I looked up AA meetings. The next morning, so 48 hours later, I hired a therapist. Like, I was trying to really fix what I needed to fix, but by then it was too little, too late. And that's one thing I would say, if any women are listening who are considering maybe making this decision, like, two things. Number one, be a person of honor and explain to your husband what problems you have. Like, you owe that to yourself and you owe it to him. And number two, like, actually give him a chance to get better. Give him a chance to right the ship. And I'm not saying do that forever, because at some point you need to make a decision what's in your best interest and the best interest of your kids. But too often I've heard women who will say, or at least believe, that they told their husband one thing, but the way that women process and communicate information is different than men. So if a woman says, well, I'm really concerned about your drinking, she might in her mind think that means I need you to stop drinking or we're going to end this. But what's actually being communicated is, I'm worried about your drinking. Yeah. That's it. Like, not I'm going to divorce you and we're going to end this 18-year marriage. So be honest. It's scary. It takes courage, but you owe that to yourself. You owe that to your husband, and you also owe that to your kids. So do that. But also for the guys, like, be very aware of these little encroaching things that start off as very innocuous. Like, having a drink on a weekend is not a big deal. Drinking a half pint of whiskey in your driveway while your family's in there having breakfast on a Tuesday is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to slip into those patterns if you're not vigilant about it. So yeah, it's been an uphill battle, man, but I'm in a much better place than I was 2 years ago. And I'm really glad and grateful and optimistic about where life is going to go.
Yeah. And, you know, I'd agree with you on that too, that, again, just going back to men and women are different, and it's not that either one's right, but the way we communicate generally is more direct. And when you say something, we take it at face value. And whereas women, whatever it is, genetically, how they were taught to communicate, whatever, you know, I've noticed that in our marriage as well. And there's times where I'm a little bullheaded too, where I'm like, you know, you said this, and that's what I took it as, when I knew she meant something else, right? Like, there's also that as well. There's a little bit of that. So that's just me being stubborn and a butthead. But
no, it's fair.
You know, we've been going, and we've made it a normal thing in our family. Our kids know that once a month, mom and dad, we go to counseling. And it's funny because when you talk to people about that, they're like, but you guys seem so happy. I'm like, We're not saying anything's
because
wrong.
we go to counseling.
Yeah, but like we need that third person there so that they can translate, and be like, well, hold on, Katie, this is what Jonathan's saying, and maybe this is how you guys can communicate to each other better. and we've made it like I said, a normal thing, so our kids don't look at counseling as, oh, it's, they're trying to, sit there with a notepad and ask us how we're feeling. Like, we've built a relationship with our counselor that it's a trusted place, and that's where we can go and work out our things in an environment where, it's I hate to say safe place because it's been commandeered, but
Can I give you a better term for that?
Yeah. I know you've said it before, but
a secure place.
There you go. Okay. It's a secure place because
secure is, or safe space is free of adversity. And it's not. A marriage is not free of adversity. No. It's just not possible. A secure place is somewhere where there's going to be adversity, but you have a healthy plan to deal with it.
I love it. That's awesome. I'm going to start saying that. I'm going to steal that one from you. But yeah, it's a spot where we can go, and we've agreed that when we leave, like, there are no bad feelings. We don't hold anything against each other, and we can have an open communication that, I mean, let's just be honest, guys. When you have kids and you're both working and you've got a dog and you've got other stuff going on, you each have your own hobbies. You've got 5 different schedules you're trying to coordinate. Your oldest does something real stupid, so then you're pissed off about that. And then your boss does something over here. Like, all of that stuff comes together at the end of the day, and then you want to talk about a budget. Like, like, all of that is just, it's a lot more complicated than just sitting down and being like, okay, well, let's look at a spreadsheet together. There's a lot more in that than just, a spreadsheet. So, that's something that, and again, you were married 18 years, and I've just barely hit 10, which jokingly, my wife looked at me and said, she was like, look, you've got a couple more days to make your decision, because after 10 years, like, the divorce rates go way down. So you're kind of stuck with me after this. Like, we're kind of joking about that, but
that's funny.
I have a lot more room to grow, obviously, and get better. So I'm no expert at this, but I love what you're saying as far as, women, speak up if you've got issues, and men, same way. Like, don't feel bad about speaking to your partner, because they really should be your best friend at the end of the day. I mean, you're going through this together and not just co-parents. And it sounds like you guys had an amazing relationship. There's just some things that happened that built up. And so, getting all back to the fact that I appreciate there's so much secrecy out there nowadays, especially when you have a podcast like yours. People, and I'm sure you got this backlash, I'm sure this happened, and I think you even mentioned it in your podcast, of it took you a little while to formulate how you were going to present this to your audience, because you are the order of man. You are Ryan Michler, the guy that is bringing on all these manly men, that the best marriage, the best husband, the best dad, trying to portray all of that and explain that to people and teach people how to get better. I can only imagine, and I remember feeling this when I was listening to you talk about it, just how hard that would be, and how much of a humble pill that was to swallow, to present the way that you did. And again, you did an amazing job, in my opinion, whatever my opinion's worth.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
But you weren't secretive about it. And you're taking that, and you're helping others as they go through that situation, or even trying to help others avoid getting to that point. What was it for you that made you look at it that way, rather than saying, you know what, I screwed up, I can't do this anymore, I've got to focus on me and my family, me and my kids, I can't do this order of man thing anymore, and hand it off to someone else? What made you want to pursue continuing this, and then and pushing through that, the ego, pride, whatever it was that you had to push through to get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, you said you think I handled it well, and other people would argue with that, and they'd say, well, you took so long to say. Well, I'm not going to tell you I'm going through divorce if I'm actively working to save my marriage and we're not divorced. Like, why would I? Because every relationship is like that, right? Every relationship has strains, and challenges. And I'm sure anybody who's been married for any amount of time knows, like, hey, we've actually considered maybe is that the best option and decided not to. Like, I think if you're being honest, most people have felt that way. To what degree, that varies, but we've all felt that way. I'm not just going to go blabber about all this stuff if I'm actively working to save my marriage when I thought it was reconcilable and it wasn't. And I had plenty of guys, to answer your question, plenty of people like, oh, you need to go, you can't do this anymore. Like you're not in integrity. No, actually, when I told people what was going on, that's actually what brought it back into alignment, what brought it into integrity. So I had a guy message me, I think he was on YouTube, and I think he was being sincere and genuine. He's like, hey man, like, I know you're going through a divorce, or you did a couple of years ago, but like, why should I listen to somebody who on relationships about going through a divorce? It's a valid question. Like, and he was asking it with respect, and I think it was genuine from where I sat. Now, look, if I was telling you all the things that you should do to get to 20 years, that would be disingenuous. I didn't make it to 20 years. So that would be a lie. But if I'm telling you from a relational perspective, like, here's the things I did when our marriage was working really well, and this is what I would continue to do if I were to do it all over again. And here's the other things that I started to do that undermined the relationship. Why would you not listen to that? You know, some guys like, well, I've been married for 6 years and never been divorced, so I have more relationship knowledge. Well, if time is the metric, well, I was married for 18. So get back to me when you hit 18 and then we can have a conversation. Time isn't the metric of success. It's what you're actually doing. And for a lot of those years, I was doing the right things. I was showing up the right way. And there was a few years that I wasn't. And unfortunately, that overrided all of the other years that could have been. But the reason why I feel confident in being able to share the way that I do is because I'm being honest. I'm just telling guys, like, specifically with regards to relationships, here's what I think works based on me doing it. That's when our marriage was doing well. Yeah. So why would anybody discount that? And here's what I was doing when it wasn't working well. And I would encourage a man to avoid these things. Yep. I actually think having that broad perspective, that knowledge, is actually very applicable. The other thing it's done, and again, I don't wish this on people, and I wish it wouldn't have happened for me, but I deal in reality, not in what could have been or what I would like to see have happened. The reality is I'm a divorced man as a single father of 4. That's the reality of the situation. And if I can use my experience to help other men work through theirs, whether it's a relation, I had a good call with a friend of mine who he's in a relationship. They've been married for longer than I was. And it's on the rocks. Like, he's thinking he might get a divorce. I don't want that to happen. And I gave him some advice that I think might be able to help based on my own personal experience. But I'm an advocate for marriage. I'm an advocate for staying committed to the partner you said you were going to stay committed to, whether that's for life or in the case of LDS doctrine, for eternity. I'm an advocate of that. But it's not always the case. And if I have experience that can help a man go through what he's going through, then I have a sense of moral obligation, moral responsibility, God-given responsibility to take the lessons I've learned, apply those in my life, and teach other people what works and what doesn't work. And that's why we came out with the course. And it's not all me, by the way. Like, I have other experts coming in to talk about rights as a father, tax and financial implications, custody schedules, and being a good co-parent, to at some point you're going to get back into the dating pool, to how to rebuild and rekindle relationships with estranged children. But I have experts coming in to talk about all these different scenarios and different modules, because I just don't want people to suffer the same way I did for a while there.
Yeah. And for me, the way I would say it is, there's always that phrase out there: you don't get financial advice from a broke person. You'll get, relationship advice from a divorced person, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. I'd extend that to maybe change the filter instead of being absolute. Like, maybe learn from the broke person, what not to do, you know. And for
Yes.
you and in your situation, it's like, it's not black and white. You had 18 years of a good marriage, and you went through a lot of ups and downs in that time frame. Learn from those 18 years, and then also learn maybe some triggers that are setting off like little sparks. Hey, this is maybe what I should have listened to from you. And it is unfortunate for anyone to have to go through this situation, but the fact that, one, you're being honest, and two, you're not bad mouthing, you're setting an example in that way, but also you're able to take this experience and continue helping men that maybe didn't like the fact that you had such a happy-go-lucky marriage, and now they're like, Ryan's not perfect. Okay, now we can learn how to get through these trials with Ryan as well, because Ryan is, you know, he's dealing with this unfortunate circumstance, and he's growing from it. He's becoming an even better man through these trials. So that's what I would, you know, pitch to people as well, is just don't sit here and say that all of the advice and all the things that you've said in the past on the podcast with guests isn't valid, because it was like, at that, in the context of that moment, that's exactly what was going on. It wasn't some behind the scenes, the divorce had been brewing for 15 years. Like, you know, at that moment, that was the advice that you had, because you were living that. And that is, you know, something that people can learn from still to this day.
Well,
And
that's what a lot of people
podcasts.
said. They're like, oh, well, you just continued on as business as normal. No, I didn't. Like, if you actually listen to the way my podcast changed after she asked for a divorce, like, you can sense objectively a level of humility, a difference in the tone of the conversation. Yeah, again, I'm not going to air my dirty laundry out if that isn't final. I'm working to solve and salvage the marriage. But the tone definitely changed, and I'm actually really grateful for that, because now I'm in a Jonathan, there's things that guys will reach out to me on that I used to be like, what the hell's your problem? Like, just be better. That now I'm like, no, like, I know, you know, guys will be like, I'm trying to stop drinking. I'm like, just stop drinking. And now I'm like, well, I mean, that'd be nice, but it's not as simple as that. So let me give you some real tools. Or guys are like, oh, I went through a divorce, and I used to be like, you should never get a divorce. That's the woman that you committed to, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, now I have a completely different perspective about what the realities of divorce actually look like on a husband, on a wife, on kids. And it's given me a new perspective that I think is helpful. And from a spiritual perspective, you know, we know through scriptures that God can take challenging, difficult, scary times and use them for good. But you have to make the decision. You know, I could have self-destructed. A lot of guys will kill themselves, unfortunately. A lot of guys will like slither away and cower in fear and darkness. And I made a decision not to do that, because now I feel like I have some sense of purpose in bringing this message, a changed message, but this message to the masses.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know you've got a hard stop here in a couple minutes, so we're going to have to do a part 2, guys, later.
Anytime, man.
After hunt season and all the adventures. But I do want to end just with this. You brought up in scriptures, it says, and one of my favorite phrases in the scriptures, and it gets so passed over because it's so frequent, but the phrase, and it came to pass. And if you look at it that way, when there are trials, they come, but they're coming to pass by us, right? And so it will eventually pass, maybe a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or shorter, but it does come to pass, because as time just continues, these trials, or even good times, they come to pass by us. And what are we getting from it? Are we learning from it? Are we developing? Are we getting better from whatever it is, a trial or a good circumstance? And so it's such a common phrase in the scriptures. We skip over it all the time, but I love that phrase because it rings true, especially during trial times. So with that, of course, I wish you the best. I know you're doing awesome. You're doing everything that you can in this situation. You're raising amazing children, and I hope you have an amazing time in Africa. Where can people find you at, man?
Yeah, if you go to orderofman.com, or if you want to listen to a podcast, Order of Man is the name of our podcast. And then if you are interested in that divorce class, it's a course, it's a program available for you guys. It's not open until October 1st. I'm not sure when this is going to go live, but that'll be available October 1st. But you can get signed up right now at divorcenotdeath.com.
Love it. Awesome. Guys, I'm going to leave all the links down below where you can find Ryan, his podcast, his website, and then, of course, if you're going through those trying times of a divorce or a possible divorce, I'll leave that link as well down below. Thanks so much for your time, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone listening. And like I always say, guys, get out, live your life, and love it. What an amazing episode, guys. I'm super stoked to be able to share this conversation with you from Ryan Michler, Order of Man, the leader of the Iron Council, and many other things. Guys, go check out the links down below so you can go check out what Ryan has going on. I absolutely have been listening to his podcast for years at this point. It's an amazing opportunity to learn from other men that have either experienced things that maybe you're going through, or to maybe they're currently going through things that you're going through, or whatever. It's always great to have a good community of individuals surrounding you, lifting you up. And sometimes you can't always find that in your neighborhood. It would be ideal if you could, but if you can't, there is the Order of Man and the Iron Council that you should definitely go and check out. We definitely want to and need to, as a community, get better ourselves, get better as a community, and it starts with us. So whatever it is that your goals are heading into this last quarter of the year, heading into 2025 in just 3 short months, definitely get your goals lined up. Reach out to Ryan through the Order of Man or the Iron Council. Join the Iron Council when it is open for enrollment, and enjoy the camaraderie that you're going to find there from some amazing men. Again, I can't stress this enough, guys. Us men are providers, protectors, and we are supposed to preside, not with a hard hand and pushing other people down, but walking hand in hand with our spouses, or if you are a single father or a single male, walking hand in hand with the people around you, your family, your friends, and leading by example. And those are the things that are taught in the Order of Man. So definitely check it out, guys. The links will be down below. If you want to support the podcast, I appreciate your support as we head into, again, the last 3 months of the year 2024. I can't believe we're already here in the last 3 months. Let's crush it together, whatever your goals may be. Feel free to reach out to me via email. Leave a review. It helps way more than you know. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, definitely subscribe. Drop a comment on all the videos that you watch. I want to hear your opinions. I usually get back to them. If you answer within the first week or so of the podcast dropping, I get back to them. Other than that, I still want to get your feedback, so provide that for me to be able to get better. Also, last but not least, if you're looking for any of the gear items that I use at the best price possible, use the codes and links down below. I appreciate you guys doing that. That saves you some money, supports me as well, and also shows the partners of the show that you trust their gear as much as I do. So all of that to be said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.